Spot the difference. The left one is the new Elegoo Centauri Carbon 2 that I just reviewed, and the right one is the Elegoo Centauri Carbon 1. That printer is not multicolour? Well, now it is. We need to take a look at this kit and find out if it works and what's involved in actually fitting it. Let's go. This video is sponsored by PCB Way. More about that in a minute. I've been sat on this box for a few weeks, not literally, or maybe, while I couldn't say anything about it, which was quite funny because I had some comments accusing Elegoo of all sorts in review I just did, all while I knew that this existed, but I was sworn to secrecy. Anyway, this is the box that it comes in, and you'll probably gather that in a box this size, it does not include a lid. I suppose it could include a fold-up lid, but no, there's no lid. There's actually no reason that you can't make your own lid. I think people will, same as they have been with the Snapmaker U1, just go to IKEA. In the box there is, in order of pulling the parts out, a manual, a bunch of cables, another cable. I will explain what these are in a bit, hopefully. There is a new poop chute. The canvas unit itself is in this bag. A bracket for the canvas unit to mount on top of the printer. A silver mystery packet. A new tool head front cover. 4 reel holders that are too heavy to stick on the edge of that box, but I'm about to realise that, and some foam, and inside the foam there's a brown box and some metal brackets. That is quite a lot of stuff for basically 40 quid. Did I mention it's 40 quid? It's actually technically £38. That appears to be about $55 if you are American. Moving on to the actual process, this will be interesting to edit. The process involves roughly removing the tool chain and cable, which we do reuse, so we're not throwing that away. Then essentially what you're doing is removing all the cowling around the tool head to get at the tool board, which is on the back of the tool head. It's not too tricky, just that my advice here for the whole process of doing the tool head would be to lay the screws down in a tray in the order that you take them off, so that when you put it back together again you can remember which screws are which. In the manual it does actually have pictures of the screws, which are helpful because it shows you the shapes of the screw heads, and that's generally enough to identify them. There are new screws that you also use here and there, and they are labelled correctly on the bags, as in the size and also what they're for. I will link you to a basic tray that I use for this kind of thing. I usually use it for testing as well. It's just a compartmented tray. It's a quick print. Other trays are of course available, and they're probably better. The back of the tool head comes off, and that's where the tool board is. As I mentioned, we are replacing the whole board. As far as I can tell, the reason we're doing this is to relocate the filament sensor to the tool head, because by default the filament sensing is all done on the side of the machine, which is no good if you are having 4 filaments coming into the tool head itself. There's a slightly awkward moment about to come up because we are adding a new 8-pin plug to allow that to happen. It routes to the front of the tool head. I've forgotten to put it in, so I, for some reason, have moved on to replacing the extruder, which is replaced with a new one that has a sensor board stuck to the front. There's a new fan as well for the heatsink, and that goes where the old one was. And then the cable goes into the thingy from the fan. I don't quite know what that cable does, and I'll realise about now that I have to put the 8-pin cable that goes from the tool board on the back to this board on the front. And this is where you will no doubt hit your first potential problem, like I did as well, because once you do that, this is a lot more cable that has to go through the small gap between the front and back where the cowling is. I had to clip off some of the plastic bits to allow it to squeeze through. I think it depends what revision you've got of the tool head cowling, because the one in the tutorial video that Elegoo share is different. But either way, you can get all these wires through. You just have to be really careful and make sure you push them all completely in. It's just about taking your time, really. You really need to just be really careful with this bit. Annoyingly, and in my defense, it seems like the right way round, but I'm about to put the bracket on here backwards, and I'm not going to realise that until I've put the front on, and that means that I'm going to have to squeeze a lot of these wires through the front cowling twice, because I enjoyed doing it the first time so much. But we finally get there. That is pretty much it, though, for the tool head. The front covers go back on, the nozzle's in, the hub pushes in and screws on from the top. Job done, and this is probably by far the hardest part over. The next part is the poop chute. You just unscrew and replace. It's 4 screws in the back. It's easy enough. I cannot tell the difference between the old one and the new one. I'm not really sure what that's all about. There must be a difference. It might be down to which hardware revision you've got. I don't know. If you're looking at fitting this upgrade to this printer, then there's a good overlap between that kind of thing and tinkering. And if you're a tinkerer, which many of us are, then you probably mess around a lot with Arduino and ESP32. And if you do that, you probably at least at some point either need or would benefit from a PCB. That's where today's sponsor comes in, PCB Way. I've shown this board to you before, but I've been thinking about putting some work in to make it more suitable for other people to use, and then release the files so that anyone can make their own. If you haven't seen me using this before, it's based on a very simple premise. You buy an ESP32, it looks like this. What you're going to do next is presumably try and put it into a breadboard, but the legs are too wide. So it's not very convenient really. It's a real pain in the neck to use these with breadboards. And that is something that's annoyed me for some years now. I figured that the solution doesn't even have to be that hard. I just made this board that you can insert the ESP32 into, and it will break out a large number of the pins, including to some convenient peripherals like LEDs, or an OLED, or a tiny speaker piezo thing. The board was of course manufactured by PCB Way, and I've used PCB Way for all my PCBs over the years now that we've been working together. And the quality of the PCBs that they make is, in my opinion, as good or sometimes even better than commercial boards. Commercial boards sometimes look a bit cheap, but PCB Way's ones, they're not. So what this does is it really opens up an opportunity for me, and potentially you, to have a clean solution to a problem that is just background annoying. And if you're interested in this, then let me know in the comments and I'll maybe tidy up this board and share it. I did make another board that could support a stepper driver, and that's a work in progress for another day. Anyway, all this stuff is really convenient if you use PCB Way for the manufacturing of the boards. It takes a lot of the work out of it, so check out their website via the links in the description. Thank you PCB Way for sponsoring this episode. Now back to the upgrade. Next up is the base of the machine. This definitely depends on which hardware revision you've got. Some models, like mine, have nothing but a plug on the board. Some have already a port in the back of the printer, which makes things easier. But either way, you do have to add the pigtail. That's what I'm calling this thing. Because I presume they've changed their mind on the wire ordering. I also had to add an extra wire to get it out of the bottom of the machine. It's just a case of looking. It's actually really clear what you're supposed to do from the video that they've made, so just skip to that part and figure out which hardware revision you've got and route the wire correspondingly. The only thing to watch out for either way here is not to interfere with the belt, the Z belt. There are like little metal bridge things if you need them, and some versions do. But for my version, it's just straight out of the hole in the base, so it never gets anywhere near the belt. The final-ish step of the install is mounting the canvas and reel holders. There's nothing difficult here at all, other than removing possibly the most belligerent strip of sticky foam that I've met in a good long while. This mounting method is about the same as it is on the CC2, so I'm quite sure that it's probably rigid enough, although the actual canvas unit is not identical to the one on the CC2. There are some adaptations that they apparently had to make this work on this machine, and also onto attaching the reel holders, which are different too, if you care. The braces on the side are pretty rigid, so I've got no concerns about those, but I will say do not pick up or move the printer by them, because it just doesn't seem like a good idea. That is it. You now just have to update the firmware, which for me at this stage was a USB stick thing, but it worked fine, and once done, I rebooted, and a new user interface appeared for managing the 4 filaments, and it's pretty much the same as the CC2, and the RFID seems to work as well. And using the CC1 in Elegoo Slicer is pretty much the same as on the CC2 as well. And just to test it, it is working fine after the upgrade. There doesn't seem to be any technical issues at all, at least eventually. Because I want to take a moment to tell you a short story about impatience. You see, I'm in the middle of working on a different video for Elegoo, and I messed up a nozzle while I was making it, which is completely unrelated to any of this, but long story short, I needed a replacement nozzle fast, so I got hold of a third-party one because they were available with next-day delivery. Fast forward to the first test of the canvas on the CC1, and this happened. It took myself and Elegoo 2 days, I think, and a whole load of tests and other stuff to figure out that this was, in fact, being entirely caused by the third-party nozzle. Why? Well, I have a hunch it's because the third-party nozzle is... Had I been patient and ordered and waited for an official nozzle, which incidentally would also have been cheaper, which really is quite insulting, but there you go. I wouldn't have had to deal with this if I'd just waited. Anyway, the moral of the story is if you buy this kit, make sure that you already have an official nozzle, and to be honest, it can't hurt to just buy a new nozzle while you're there. I think they're £17 for the entire assembly, and if you do that, make sure you use my affiliate link. And I assure you, that was not an attempt at the world's most elaborate upsell, but if it works, it works. Speaking of, I will put the links in the description for the kit. The chances are it will be in and out of stock over the coming weeks, but I don't really have any actual info about that. That's just my assumption. Do I think it's worth it to buy this kit? Yes, I do. For the money, it's absolutely a no-brainer. It seems like it performs equivalently to the CC2 as far as I can see so far. Not done a lot of testing on it because I want to get this video out as soon as possible, but it works, and it works about the same as the CC2. It is probably about 2 hours work to fit it if you take your time, which I strongly suggest doing, because even though there's no challenges or any difficulty, you don't want to mess it up. Obviously, this kind of mod is presumably at your own risk. If you mash a screwdriver into a PCB while doing it, then that's your own problem to fix. So what I'm saying is that this upgrade is not entirely without risk. If you have a working printer and that is absolutely critical, perhaps think about that. But it does seem like it's pretty likely that this will go down without any major hitches. But we'll see what happens when it hits the community, as we always do. Any questions, stick them in the comments as usual. Remember to subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.